G'day, I'm Ollie Lalive and welcome to GRDC in Conversation. For the last few years, we've travelled Australia's grain growing regions, spending time around kitchen tables, in sheds and workshops, and having my eyes open to the incredible people who live and breathe the Australian grain sector. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional lands and people on which this podcast has been recorded and produced, paying our respects to First Nations Australians and using the ancient practice of storytelling to pass on knowledge, share perspectives and learnings as to what has shaped the sector and is shaping our future. This series is a GRDC investment and takes you behind the scenes with a whole range of people, uncovering their stories, hearing about their passions, and highlighting the projects that are part of their everyday. Our journey and this series continues as we put a spotlight on the next gen, and I can't wait for you to meet them. Today's conversation is with James Hillcoat, partner at Pinion Advisory and someone who's spent more than a decade working alongside grain growers and agribusinesses across Australia. James didn't grow up on a farm and his pathway into agriculture wasn't linear. From cycling to a Saturday job as a teenager in the United Kingdom, to travelling, working overseas, studying later than most, and eventually building a career grounded in trust and long-term relationships. Over time, his role has shifted from being highly technical to deeply people-focused. And today, much of his work is about helping people make decisions in uncertain, emotional, and often volatile environments. In this conversation, we explore how careers evolve, what leadership really looks like in agriculture, and why doing the best you can with the information in front of you matters more than ever. Our guest for the GRDC in Conversation today is someone who, funnily enough, and I actually don't know how, was a lecturer, a casual lecturer for me in my final year of university. And James Hillcoat, I think last time I saw you, it was a livestock essay event here, and you came up and you said, "Oh, we're at Marcus together." But you were actually teaching it was risks.
Yeah, well, we had a bit of a course on commodity risk management for final year students. It was a week-long intensive, Ollie, so I'm surprised you didn't remember.
Well, no, I did remember that because I was going to say, and I was only thinking about this earlier, there was two kind of intensives that I remember that I think were so beneficial that I think they should be refreshers maybe every second year. It was yours, which was, yes, it was called commodity risk management, but I actually thought about it being this is just beneficial to anyone to look at risks and understand the cost of production as the fundamentals to business performance. So I still use it quite a bit. The other one was negotiation, and so I probably use both quite a bit.
It's a fair couple, I think, to pull out, Ollie. Yeah.
I would love to know. So if we just go back to that was 2017, Marcus Oldham. You mustn't have been hugely long out of Marcus Oldham yourself, were you?
No, not really. I finished in 2014. Yeah. So, and then working in a couple of harvest seasons and production years under my belt as a grain broker at the time, it made me reflect on my time at Marcus and go, actually, as a fourth year intensive topic, there's a lot in this because you're not just talking selling grain, you're talking about cost of production and you're talking about all the things that lead up into creating that cost of production. So it's a massive topic. Yeah. So I found an opportunity to get back there.
Was it daunting going back and facilitating to students after only a few years out? Because, yeah, like in my head, I was thinking there was yourself and I dare say, was it Chris maybe?
It was Chris, yeah.
There you go. See, I do remember parts.
So I deferred all the hard questions on to Chris and I did the things that I thought I could do, Ollie. So, yeah, it was a great experience. It was good. And it was good to travel with a workmate as well. And one of those little career highlights you sort of think back on. But, yeah, it was a bit nerve-wracking to come back in and then makes you think of all those poor graduate teachers that sort of go back and teach high school and they're only a couple of years older than the students they're teaching. And, yeah, they get through.
It was. It's definitely one of those courses that stuck with me. But we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I think what I'm excited about for today's conversation is that I think there's the backstory. I think we're both very aligned in terms of our interests in people, and I'll say nearly the psychology of how people think, but then how that comes into the everyday business space. But talk to me more about how I'm going to say your career in agriculture started. It was as a kid riding a bike to the local farm a world away from where we are here in South Australia.
Yeah, that's right. So I grew up in Lincolnshire in England. So Lincolnshire is it's a relatively flat county, big yield, so it's sort of averaging 10 tonne a hectare of wheat. But it was quite diverse as well. So you'd have veggies in there, you'd be potatoes, rapeseed as well. So yeah, and I didn't come from a farm. I grew up in a farming area. So I think I spent a number of harvests late at night sitting on the back fence and waving at every time they'd come round, and there's that kid again. You just love the smells, it gets under you. And then, I sort of started working when I was 13, got a Saturday job, and I think I was chief paint drip watcher for a vintage tractor collection for a while there, Ollie, and that hasn't really stopped since.
Was it just the fact of like working being useful that drew you into agriculture, or was there something about the industry that you think drew you in?
Yeah, I think to start with, mum and dad were always really keen to. Yeah, the Saturday job was a really, really key thing. It was only sort of 4 hours casually, and as a young kid, it teaches you a little bit about money, and just showing up on time, learning those workplace techniques, and I think they're quite formative, even though you don't see it at the time. And then I sort of really became a lot more interested in it when I did a work placement through school in year 10. And I selected to work on a farm about 5 miles away from where we were. It was cycle there. And I saw a lot there. You couldn't drive anything, of course, during school placement, but I did say, oh, look, if you've got anything over harvest, I would love to. And it's sort of where I got my in there. And he was a baling contractor. And there's a few little people along your journey that I think just give you an opportunity and support you in that opportunity. And so he would drive the tractor. He had quite a few balers around, but he gave the 16-year-old a crack. I would drive in the paddock baling for, I don't know, 12 hours a day, whatever it may be. It's probably something illegal. And, it was just great. And it really got, that sort of really got under your skin. Passion started from there. And, I haven't really looked back.
And your career into agriculture kind of, I guess, weaved its way a little bit.
It did.
Surprisingly to me, you actually didn't go the whole way through school. You decided to drop out a little bit early.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So over there, you've got year 11 is compulsory, years 12 and 13 at A levels, and that's kind of your uni enter score. So I did the first year of year 12. It was with the same mates group, coasted along and got to the end of the year and got the results, and they were really ho-hum. And I did say to mum on the playground then, I said, I'm done. I'm just going to go off and try something else. And so, but if I was leaving, not having a job wasn't an option. They said, you will support you in what you do, but you've got to get a job. I said, that's fine. So I went to a higher output, more corporatized family estate, and worked a harvest there, and then into tillage and sowing. And and then it's sort of the pathway changed a bit, because when that work ran out and you go into winter, it comes back to more your full-time work as you're not required anymore. I did a stint as a painter and decorator. Most important job in that trade is the radio, not the paintbrush, as the boss would say. And then when I just turned 18, mum and dad were really keen. They said, you've always been interested in outdoor stuff. What about this summer camp through a company called PGL, where you'd look after kids coming out from England, and was essentially staged in France for 6 months, and I learned sailing and taught sailing out there. So it was agriculture and I sort of diverged for a little bit. I was trying to find my feet. Yeah.
Interesting that like that coaching, teaching, development of others is a real thread that's gone the whole way through your career.
Yeah, it has actually. And mum was a teacher, granny was a teacher, my wife's a teacher. So I've sort of been surrounded by teaching all my life. I've really enjoyed it. Even if it's sort of not formally teaching, I've really enjoyed just the interactions with people. And this is going to sound super cliche, but watching people grow and find their feet, and finding that little niche about how far can I push this person to be within their comfort zone, know that they're going to swim, but also let them drown a little bit.
Yeah.
And find that comfort zone. And I think that's what teaching will do. That obviously that terrible example when I'm talking about a sailing school over summer.
Yeah, you got to be too careful. No one was harmed.
No one was harmed.
Oh, that's good. Good teacher.
They all had fun.
Yeah. Well, how did you come back to agriculture, and when did it come back into your life?
Yeah, so it actually came back when I was 21, which was a fair stint away. So by that stage, I'd had 4 years out of school. I'd done casual positions across that time, but also I was really finding my way as a sort of young adult. I did another ski season in France, another 6 months out there, did a bit of travel around Europe, really privileged to have had that opportunity. And then had the opportunity to come to Australia. So part of that was just a working holiday visa at the time. So I got to see a lot of the country, or a lot of the touristy spots at least anyway. Did a bit in New Zealand. And it was during that time someone said, well, if you really like coming back to agriculture, why don't you go and have a look at Marcus Oldham? And I knew nothing about it. I'd actually worked with some students that had been on farm in England that had come from there a couple of years earlier, as it turned out. But it only happened that way because I was in Geelong at the time, by pure fluke.
That's insane, isn't it?
Yeah, just funny how it works out. Yeah.
How did Marcus change your perspectives on agriculture and the opportunities ahead in it?
Out of this world, Ollie. Like, I think, I was reflecting on this after we caught up and go, oh, how would I answer that question? And I think it's just, there's so much more to agriculture that you just don't know as a kid, and especially a kid that probably hasn't grown up on a farm and been surrounded by, love driving tractors, I love the machinery. But then it came to a point that the more I knew about agriculture and everything that went into it, the dollars associated with it, the people and the job types within it, it started to make a lot more sense. If I hadn't personally gone there, I wouldn't have seen that. And the reason it was so formative for me was because I'd been out of school 4 years, which is not actually, it's not atypical for Marcus, is it? But I think what I was really worried about was, part-time education, being able to drift and then go, how would I fit back into that world? Whereas you never really had a chance to think otherwise because you were loaded up 5 days a week, lots of work, but it's really practical. So Ollie, maths never really came naturally to me, weirdly enough. But it made a lot more sense when I got there because it was just put into practical terms. And, I think when I come back to, I couldn't just go there. As an international student, you have to be in a different position. There's no additional help. And I do want to just say thanks to Mum and Dad for backing a kid that said, I'd like to try this. And yeah, being in a position that put them out a bit, to be honest. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those ones, if I look back, like the investment in that education, like it is literally the single greatest investment I think I'll make in my life because of it's not just the career pathways and the connections, it's what it's opened up personally and friendship groups and everything else from that.
Yeah. I think the sheer grit and determination that it needs at times, and then the need to go and try and find a solution at times, but also know, you've got a bit of a team to work in with, understanding different avenues, broadening your horizon, learning how to deal with people you don't like, learning how to deal with people you do like.
Yeah.
All of that stuff exists there. And it's different to school because it's, and this is just uni in general, it's different to school because you are in a peer group that is aligned to what you're aligned with rather than just, quasi friends you come across and make at school that, that they're great at that time of life. Yeah.
So talk to me, coming out of Marcus, what were the options for you and how quickly did you land on your feet in terms of a career, or was it something you picked up through different internships?
Yeah, this was an internship.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So it was coming to the end of my visa and I was really unsure what to do. I wasn't ready to leave, but I, I understand the border rules. So I was actually thinking about taking the long road home back to England at the time. And, I'd been exposed to some time in China. I was keen to work in a trading house in China for a bit, and then see where that would land me. As it turned out, my internship through Marcus, you do a year out there, or certainly did in the course I was in. I decided to go down the consulting line. I felt that my technical skills with machinery probably weren't up to scratch as a farm manager. So I did the farm management course, but I felt I was probably more aligned to the people side of things, and I was really enjoying the business elements. And so I did go down the consulting line, and that was with a company at the time called Rural Directions. And I had the opportunity to work with them for a year. And I got to the end of that year and was like, wow, this was everything that I imagined about a role could be. It had diversity, had a great team of people. There's a real network vibe with that. And what you're exposed to is just something completely different. And it completely complemented everything you'd learnt at Marcus as well. And you were deploying that toolbox on a daily basis and still do. So I told them that and said, oh, if you have something, I would love that. But I understand the complications because it would mean employer sponsored. There was nothing immediately available, but things changed and they backed me in. Employer sponsored me. They'd had a year's interview with me, so that was a benefit to them.
Yeah, it's not too bad, is it?
Yeah. So you've just got these little things to some people, massive things to others, where they just back you in and you find your pathway from there. Yeah.
And when you say you kind of found your feet in consulting, like was it the types of projects you were doing, or were there some formative projects that kind of allowed you to feel like, wow, okay, this is my place, this is where I can add value?
Yeah, I think for me, Ollie, I'll never say never, but I don't think I ever want to be a teacher per se. But having that background and like of developing people, I could see that you could have a lot of different influences across a lot of different situations. You've got high performers, low performers, lots of money, little money. And I think there's things within that you can do with everything, give or take. You've got, conflict in there. Naturally, you're not going to tackle a lot of that as a grad, but you are exposed to it. And you go, well, actually, I can connect in this situation. I can add value in this situation. And so I think you develop your own consulting skill set, across that time.
A project you were involved in the early days was a GRDC one, wasn't it?
It certainly was, yeah.
Talk to me about that and how that kind of shaped your perspectives on Australian farming and Australian agribusiness.
Yeah, so it was the integration of technical data and profit drivers project. And so it was a big investment by GRDC at the time in the farm business space. And I had just joined what was then Rural Directions as a graduate in 2013. And this project came up and I was aligned with another consultant, Simon, who we worked on it together. And it was all about finding out what was driving performance in top 20% businesses nationally in Australia. So whilst it shaped and changed other people's careers and they were a bit more developed than I was, we were working with other consultancies as well to get this done. It basically fully encapsulated everything I'd just learned in the last 4 years and put it into a project form with on-ground benchmarking information, working with clients, and then pulling insights out in terms of what was driving top 20% business. And I still use that stuff today.
So if you pull out a couple of the key kind of takeaways, what do the best businesses do?
Yeah, so we work to a profit driver framework where gross margin optimization is a big one. So how much we can bring in and how do we do it cost effectively. The next one's a low cost business model. So we don't want to, do that at the expense of overcapitalizing, undercapitalizing. Are we using our, people resources right? Land access, debt positioning, all those things. We want to try and get in the right balance to create as much profit as we can, because with profit it gives you options for growth, whatever it may be. Yeah. And then there was another one around people and management. So top 20% managers were saying and doing things consistently that were driving those first two, and the implementation of those was so critical. And you can only pull that out through human factors surveys and working with people directly. And then the last one's risk management. So it's a profit driver framework that really frames that up irrespective of geographic location, enterprise choice. So, you can have that chat with someone in the UK just as much as you can with someone here in South Australia.
When you look at the best businesses, like were there traits in you say like a low cost business option so to maximize profitability? Was the type of business driven by the type of manager versus the soil type, geography, etc.? Like was there?
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, so there wasn't any particular crop type that was driving it as such, which was quite an empowering message, I think, for being able to say to anyone, hey, this is what's happening at the top end of ag, which is so important to inform the strategy for everyone. But it was whatever worked for that environment. So highest and best margin land use, it's probably more applicable to commodity type outputs. Niche crops, bit different. But certainly from a grains perspective, it was quite applicable regardless. So the emphasis on timeliness, organisation, management affected free kicks were a really big differentiating factor of how those businesses performed in that particular environment against the skill set of others. So it's comparable nationally versus their peers. And what they were saying and doing was quite similar to each other at the top 20% line. And it really came down to their outlook on life as well, how they balance stuff, how they value things, how they organize stuff, how they deal with things that they can't control, how they preempt stuff. They're very considered decision makers and extremely good at implementing. Yeah.
And so like a key takeaway there was that better people, irrespective of business type, will shape better businesses through working on developing themselves as both managers, but also as people, and kind of that perspective they have on life as well around it.
Yeah, typically, yes, Ollie. That's definitely our observation. There's some very successful businesses out there. But you have to be able to put yourself in a position to remain high performance, and that has to be driven through management. You can have seasonal luck, but again, I've seen seasonal luck occur and a business not being in a position to capture that seasonal luck. So they've not capitalized on it. And we sort of made sure we spaced that. We'd do things a little bit differently next time, perhaps, when you know more in hindsight. But, you want to take out some seasonal lumps and bumps to achieve that result, you have to show replication. You can't fluke that.
And so when you say like high performing teams or high performing businesses, can you explain that a little bit more to me and the audience as well?
Yeah, I think I'll try and be balanced on this one, Ollie, because my perception of what's a high performing team might be different to someone else's. But typically, I think you don't want to burn people out. Being an employer of choice is always those aspirational targets. I think it's a bit harder depending on where you farm. You can be a really great business owner or amazing leader, but the access to labour has become really tricky. And that might just be a case of, geographically where you live and how attractive that might be. But I think a high performing team is really one that, gets behind the what and the why you do it. And they want to go out and do this stuff. They get why you're doing it, and sort of want to pull in the same direction. And I think, that's where you can sort of align strategy. You align a lot of people factors with that, and you're trying to align culture. Yeah.
And for you as well, you're not only working with families and businesses on how they develop that themselves, you've had the opportunity to start to influence and develop that yourself. So with your role at Pinion, how have you gone and how have you approached that to go, it's not just about advising clients on it, actually let's do it in-house here as well?
Yeah, I think you might be asking the wrong person. You might want to ask my team about what they think about my management and leadership, Ollie. But my aspirations for it, I think, it's a really complex thing to get right. I think sometimes you can find yourself between a rock and a hard place at times, and having to make a call that suits the commercial aspects of the business versus, but you're trying to do that with high care. I think if you don't care for your people and have their best interests at heart, it's really hard for them to align behind you. We've had huge change in our business. The business I started with finished with around 25 people. We then merged in 2020 with 4 other consultancies to form Pinion Advisory. So we now have 100 people in Australia and global links too. So it's been a massive learning curve to go from what was essentially a medium-sized it's probably a small family business when you think of consulting, to then the mindset shift. It goes to a much larger, much more people-orientated, more departmentalized business. And as a 35-year-old, and at the time sort of, early 30s, moving to that and taking on a lot more responsibilities, I've relied on a lot of people for their insight and wisdom. I've tried to do a lot of reading. And I think it's one of these things you just go, yeah, I probably wouldn't have done that again, or I'll do that differently next time. But I think as long as you try and keep everyone's best interests at heart and go, what would I do for this team? And what could they do as a team for this business, is probably the only thing I'm striving for.
And constantly learning. I think that's the only real constant, isn't it?
It sure is. And creating diversity and momentum behind the why. There's a lot of things we've sort of tried to pursue as a business as well, and I think it's just so important to bring everyone on for the ride. And there is change in things. There's change every day. Every time you read the news, you sort of wonder what it's all coming to. I think just trying to maintain an even keel, Ollie, be as transparent, create as much trust as you can, really hopefully brings everyone on and pulling in the same direction. Yeah.
Your work today, like the evolution in any career, and it was a conversation we're having on one of the other episodes as well, is it's that growth you go through of being, I'll say in the weeds, but being the technical expert and working on everything, to nowadays, I think last time we spoke, you said 70% of your roles just focused in and around people, and 30% is roughly on the technical side. So yeah, what's that shift been like, and what does your day-to-day look like today?
Yeah, I probably came to this realization last year, Ollie, that technical still takes up a good chunk, and it's the first in with consulting, but there's so many other factors. So I do a lot of benchmarking. It gives clarity over how a business is performing. It takes a lot of noise out. I see it as a really valuable step that businesses can take on to understand more about themselves and how they operate as a business. But you have to facilitate, that's a diagnostic tool. You have to be there to facilitate the discussions about the human factors behind that result, and where the opportunities exist for businesses, where some of the opportunities for development exist for businesses too. Because there could be bucket loads of external opportunity, but it might be some internal points that are actually holding them back. And so it's on the consultant to go in there and establish what they are and help come up with a pathway. It's much less about going in my mind, it's case by case, but in my mind, you're there to help facilitate the depth of thinking required to come up with the right strategy or the right outcome for that business. And people naturally struggle in that case if they're not asked the right questions. So I was sort of struggling with this a little bit last year, Ollie, and thinking, geez, I seem to do less in a technical space, even though it still underpins a lot of what I do, but I'm having a lot more people-based discussions. And, I read Kate Burke's book recently on succession, and, she sort of said she'd started, very technically heavy, and that's exactly the way she's gone. I won't draw parallels between Kate's ability and mine, Ollie, but it was sort of nice to hear that was also the way to go. And there's been people in my business too that say, a lot of what we do is 70% facilitation and 30%, technical backup. And yeah.
And one thing I like, and we were chatting, the examples, and especially in family businesses, which is the vast majority of kind of farming businesses that I presume you deal with as well, emotion is such a huge driver in ultimately the success of the business, but also a huge influencer in some of the tension and challenges in the businesses as well. How, and there's no, I guess, I want to preface, there's no right and wrong, but with your experience, how do we use emotion as a driver in family businesses for good, but then also, not necessarily dismiss it or park it, but balance that out in terms of trying to get the business where people want to take it?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I think we increasingly come more away from removing emotion from decisions. It's not actually what we want to do. We do want to think clearly, though. So if emotion's getting in the way of what's in front, we need to separate the two for a brief moment. But I think to get to the outcome, we have to address those emotional points first, because they're probably coming from a place of hurt or, they're feeling unheard, unrecognized, unvalued. So if you don't unlock that part first, the strategy is probably a bit meaningless, where you could find you get down the road and then you get to a pressure point where all that simmering stuff comes to the surface and it's essentially rearing its head as an unresolved issue. So I think emotion in business, if it goes untapped, unfixed, is toxic. If it's the wrong type of, not the wrong type of emotion, but something that's ill-equipped for the future. However, you can find some really constructive discussions that create a really proactive outcome if you address it head on. And I think that in itself is a skill that we've had to learn. I've had to learn personally. I've had to learn it through my business management side of things here, working with clients. And that's just trying to be more direct in what we're saying, but ensuring it comes from a place of care. And if we can practice radical candor, that is a key outcome for everyone, I think. Yeah.
And so communication being the fundamental underlying piece there of how do you actually surface what's going on? Has that been key to both your business, but then also how you consult?
Yeah, I think it's something that you have to actively, you have to remind yourself to do it. I think everyone gets busy. Everyone knows that we should be doing this stuff more. Some people are better at communicating than others. It is a learned skill, and it's something I think it's easy to park as well. But then the downside of not doing it is that where we leave gaps in the truth, we let perception come in from other people, and that perception generally ranges to the extreme side. Mm-hmm. They can be heard, but I think, if we've got transparency in what we're doing and the communication and why we're doing it, people go, oh yeah, no worries. I get that. Yeah. And so we remove some of that perception by doing that, and then it settles people again. And I think when you've been through COVID, I've been through COVID, I wondered if we should have brought our kids into the world at some points in COVID and go, what have we done? I think if we just allow everything to find its new normal and just give things a bit of time, work them through, be pragmatic, I think that's what we need in this day and age, because it is fast moving. It is hard to keep up with, right?
Incredibly. I want to flip it back onto you and be able to talk from maybe some of your perspectives on how you've benefited through communication. And I know you talked about over the last couple of years, which has probably happened at various points in your career, looking at, all right, I'm at a fork in the roads, what's next? But that ability to, one, have the relationships, but to communicate yourself. Can you share a little bit about, when you've found yourself in a rut, how have you used mentors, both, through the businesses, books, podcasts, whatever it might be? How have you lent on mentors, and where have they shown up for you?
Yeah. I think, look, I've been with this business a long time, and it's changed. It's gone to, whatever 2.0 is, but I think I've also gone to version 2.0 of that career. And I think it's so important you continue a growth trajectory, and you're in charge of that growth trajectory. You've just got to find a vessel that can facilitate it. And, you know, I think you've got to ask yourself the question first about how I can contribute to this growth trajectory rather than trying to find an excuse otherwise. But I think at some points you're going to find you get to a bit where you go, I feel really muddy about where I'm at and I'm not sure how to go about it. This manifested itself for me probably in sort of 2021-ish, I think. And I'd been in business 10 years. We just had kids. So life had changed a fair bit as well from a personal standpoint. I was working heavily in grain brokerage, but within that I was doing a lot of farm business-based activities with advisory board work, benchmarking as well. And so when 2022 kicked off with Ukraine, huge prices, but it came with huge volatility. And so for me, that probably brought to the surface a lot of what I'd been feeling, and that was that sort of feeling like, well, where do I fit in this world at the moment? And that was probably the first time I questioned where I was going to be heading. I was looking at some other options, and in that case, rather than sort of going straight to one way or the other, I sort of slowed up a little bit. I got a few different avenues, and some of those mentors were clients too. So yeah, I'm certainly don't aim to be the smartest guy in the room, but they're part of your network. They're there to help you too at times. And then you've also got people within your business that you've worked with for so long. So, you know, you've got to have a chat with them and go, look, I'm feeling a bit lost. I don't really want to leave. And yeah, they were good enough to come down and go, this is the pathway we're on. And I think, you know, by that stage, I'd sort of figured out what I needed to be doing to continue that growth trajectory. I was sort of turned to sort of consultant 2.0, purely farm business management based now. And it's working really well, Ollie. Yeah.
And so since you became James 2.0, what has either reinvigorated you or what's focused you that you're really enjoying in your work?
I think by being so close to numbers, you naturally have a lot of empathy for how businesses are sitting. You share in that joy of a good year. You commiserate in a poor one. And, you know, margins are tight at the moment. So I think that ability to be a stalwart through those conditions, drought conditions, we've had a couple of really low rainfall years here in South Australia, particularly, and in Victoria. And I think there's messaging in that for areas that have done quite well to go, well, let's not get out of step either. So you can see what's happening at the coalface, because you do have a really privileged position to see across a number of different businesses. So I think if you can bring that insight and go, look, this is what's happening, provide as much visibility, as much communication to the grain sector as you can, or industry in general, and go, these are some of the management things we might want to be thinking about in your particular environment, in your particular business. So I think that's where some of that can come in, Ollie. Yeah.
I just want to follow that up. And yeah, with your experiences and both from, pulling in again from, and I think you just come at it with such a good world perspective, because it's not only your career, you've got your team and your clients that you work with. What advice would you give to people who are contemplating whether it's that next step career-wise or the next step as a business when it comes to some of the things to think through and how to approach it?
I think you've got to inwardly look first. I wasn't a business partner at the time. I was an employee, and I think it's easy. It's somewhat easier to take the easier option of going, I'm going to go for a sea change. But you may find that, you know, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Admittedly, I don't know. But I think you've got to inwardly look at it and go, well, what value am I deriving from my position at the moment? And I think from a consulting standpoint, what you're giving up is a lot of hard-built relationships with clients. It is not a chop and change environment to be in. And I think if you come into consulting with that mindset, you are not going to be successful. You're not going to be long-term in the business, long-term in industry in that format, because it is so relationship heavy. You need to show credibility. You need to show empathy. And people work off track record.
Yeah.
And so once you've got those relationships, you are in a really privileged position, certainly with a few of them that are sort of, more frequent, more recurrent. Some of these clients have been with for over 10 years. You see their kids growing up. You see the babies coming along and stuff. Like, that's really good. So I think you've got to be really careful to go, what would I be giving up if I was to make a change? And is it going to add value to what I really want it to do? Or am I fundamentally really enjoying what I'm actually doing? I just need to have a bit of a tweak up change. And is that something we can facilitate?
I think your piece there around the importance of relationships, but also that it's a funny thing in agriculture, like where you can be, I'll say, at a wedding of someone from your local community or someone who you've gone to uni with, and because of the way the industry is structured and the friendships that are created, you could be there with someone who's the head buyer for McDonald's or leading red meat at Woolworths or whatever. Like it's this, you only ever like one part removed from people in the sector as well. And as you say, that's where relationships are so instrumental, because you are part of this community, not just locally, but also at a national level.
Yeah. Yeah. Never burn a bridge.
No. I want to ask you about, your involvement with the Country Fire Service as well,
sure.
and living and being part of the local community. But how's volunteering, but also just that work shaped your perspective?
Yeah, I've been with CFS for 8 years now, and admittedly, they're a great brigade we've got, and it is I initially started because I wanted our kids to see, when the chips are down, I wanted them to see that you go out and help. I want them to also see that you are going to work with different people, different backgrounds, different perspectives, but fundamentally all with the same idea to go, I just want to go and be a part of this solution. So I started with the CFS just before first Hugo was born. And with kids and work and other things, and the missus working 4 days a week too, like some of those calls and the call list just dropped off a bit. But certainly at the start, I was exposed to a few, quite big incidents early on in the piece. And it's formative in seeing how a big operation works. There's 13,000 members in South Australia. 13,000 volunteers, sorry. Plus you've got states. So there's a whole hierarchy of stuff there. And so it's interesting to see how that flows and how incidents are worked through, but also the stuff you go through when you arrive at an incident, and be that fire, road crash, whatever it may be, and go, this has happened. What are the practical steps we need to do to make this better? I found this out, I think I found that out quite early on. You've got to think on your feet, but you've also got to make sure you take a step back and don't commit a crew into an unsafe environment. Yes, it's a fast moving environment, but we cannot get caught in the wrong position here. What is going on? What are the factors telling you? So it does create that critical thinking under pressure. That's been really good, Ollie. The other thing it's done is given me perspective, because my second job ever was a head on between two B doubles, double fatality. Horrific day. Like, it was windy, middle of nowhere. I still have flashback. I can hear the ratchets on the curtain cider, unfortunately. But what it did do was show me that life's quite finite. They collided in dust. They wouldn't have had a lot of time to think about it. And to me, that was the only thing I thought when trying to address that scene, was, what do I need to take out of this? Because I can't fix what's happened. And I actually take that through with clients too. So not having a farm myself helps, consulting, because you don't get caught up in the same emotion of season. So in many ways, what I'll do is now go in there and go, whatever's happened has happened. I'm there to try and make it better. what are the practical things that I can do to make this better? And that's exactly what you're doing in the Country Fire Service. Yeah, just on different scales. So it does give that perspective. Yeah.
It's so powerful. An area, and probably maybe the last topic we'll talk about, is where it's an emerging, area across society in Australia, this succession from the boomer generation to millennials and Gen Zs coming through. Like, it's, depending on where you read, $3.5 to $5 trillion that will be transacted over the next 20 years in Australia. Farming, it's going to be huge. Succession, obviously with your skill set, becomes really interesting and an area of huge opportunity. Yeah, I guess when it's done right, and also to really impact generations of livelihoods from the work you do. So what is it that's pulling you towards that area of the industry at this stage?
Yeah. I think as a consultant, it's a natural progression, Ollie. Like, yeah, I don't claim to be good at succession. Do I want to be good at succession? Yeah, I do, because I've got the skill set to do it, as do a number of other consultants that are really good at facilitating discussion and working through the cold hard facts. But it's a really complicated area. If it's done well, I think it could be enormously rewarding for people. So for my own development, I think that's where Consultant 3.0 comes from. Because there's a lot to learn about how those things interact. You're dealing with a lot of emotions, but you're also dealing with farmland. Within the last 5 years has doubled or trebled. That creates problems at the succession line. We're still waiting for, what do we think is going to happen with productivity? How does that support it? I mean, the other people you've been talking to, that's entirely what they're focused on, is getting more from less, and driving that productivity line that supports land value growth. At the moment, we've got, many areas, a bit of a bubble. And so we've got to back that trend. You go, well, it's done this for X, Y, Z years. Productivity's also done this for X, Y, Z years. We've just detached a little bit. So it does make succession farm viability going forward a difficult conversation to have. But if we really broke it down, I think there's a lot of training that's involved for a lot of people. There's also a lot of situational awareness for, if they're off-farm siblings, on-farm, your on-farm parents. There's a lot of understanding that's got to happen between those generations, communication, and clarity. We don't want perception sneaking in that environment. So if we can, build people up around that, remove entitlement thinking, that is a real scourge of the industry. Gratitude is the antidote to that. And understanding, what have your parents come through? What have they built? What have they done? What do they need? And then how does that relate to what is a viable farm and what the family wants going forward? But it's an area that, I can see huge opportunity in as a consultant. You can provide a lot of value. And it's an area that we as an industry have got to get better at. Yeah.
When you look at, if we just sit down in, let's say 5 years, we won't make it quite 10. In 5 years, what do you hope we're talking about in terms of, maybe from the people's side of agriculture and especially the grains industry? What would you hope would be the conversations we're having then?
Yeah, I can't see any other way that's not going to involve some sort of robotics, to be honest. When I sort of think around the clients that we've got, and the issues they have with labour availability, the emphasis on growing farms will have come to the detriment of some community as well. So, footy leagues amalgamating, you've fundamentally got less people in regional areas, the services drop. So, I think there's got to be things within that to go, we can't just push people harder and harder and harder to try and achieve the same result. But we cannot let the productivity and timeliness factors fall apart, because they are the key drivers of a high-performance farm. So whilst I'd love to say that, it was all hunky-dory, Ollie, I think there's got to be a discussion around how we use the available technology and resources at the right price too, to bridge some of those gaps, because the impact is going to be less attractive to people thinking about coming on farm. And I think the mindset shift to go, well, we want a life as well, is a really valid thing for people to have. And if they feel trapped in that environment, it has a range of implications down the track with land value, attractiveness to industry. So yeah, I think that's probably the way it's going to go. 5 years might be a bit too early for that, but you're going to start to see a few of these things creep in. But yeah, I want to see them replace the human factors, but I think you can, the business can supplement some of that stuff in there to help. Yeah,
for sure. And then a couple of things that are making you most excited, interested, little passion projects that maybe you're looking to pursue within Australian ag, and it may well be specifically in grains. What's front of mind for you right now?
Yeah. I think front of mind is probably the opportunity within our business at the moment. We've made it more of a global business. We're developing a global network as well. And I think we will still be on the ground farm gate consultants, but the opportunity that creating a bigger network contains is that breadth of thinking and questioning, and the ability to question the information that's coming in, that breadth of thinking, the team that's around you that can help support a decision and a really valuable on-farm experience or a really valuable on-farm outcome for a client that can come from that. So that is a bit of a passion project for a few of us here at Pinion at the moment, and an exciting one. So I think, that has, and particularly as a business partner too, that is definitely a passion project. And I think the other ones are around, developing skill set, but really also developing the capability that we need from younger consultants as well, so that they can have an equally rewarding career. It sounds, again, really cliche, but for me, the training, development of people, transfer of IP and continual transfer of IP, finding that bit of water that you can just dump them in a little bit. They're going to swim, they're going to swim, but you just make it a little bit uncomfy and let them find their comfort zones. That's something that we need to continually think about and grow people so that it becomes a rewarding career for them. And, we've got a number of family farms. Well, number of farms in general is still a big number. The challenges they've got to go through challenges and opportunities, I might add, are big. And so if we can help inject really good people into that environment that can help facilitate that too, with numbers, all that sort of thing, we'll have done a good thing.
It is very exciting. Well, James, thank you so much for sitting down and having a chat with us for GRDC in Conversation. It's been, great to hear more of your backstory, but also your passions and perspectives and how it's shaping not just your work, but the work you're doing with clients as well.
No, pleasure, Ollie. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, mate. Well, that's it for another episode of GRDC in Conversation. I hope you're enjoying coming around Australia just as much as I am, meeting the people who are shaping Australia's grain sector and ensuring that we're able to keep thriving for future generations. If you know someone who you'd love to see us get on the podcast, reach out to the GRDC via their social channels or via your local rep. The next In Conversation episode is back in a fortnight's time, so mark your diaries. We can't wait to see you then.